Well, very quickly, give us three, besides Bitcoin and Ethereum, the three most promising blockchains for the coming 2 years.
Oh boy. And obviously, I mean, you've already touched on some of them, right? Like obviously Solana is going to be on my list there. And I do think I'm super excited for it. I mean, I think that it has, done something that very few other chains I think have even thought about trying to do, which is scale. I think that like most chains that I look at, I just like don't get the sense that scaling is like anywhere on their roadmap. At least not really. That is just sort of like mostly an afterthought for them. And I think Solana has taken it extremely seriously. And I think they're one of the only chains that has a real plausible path forward here to scaling to the level you would need to get to if you wanted industrial scale usage. So, okay, so that's certainly one that would be on the list. What else would be here? Well, I think Avalanche it's a real chain. It's a cool chain. The team knows their shit, and has been putting a ton of work into it. And I think they've prioritized maybe different things than I would naturally have done, but I'm not sure they're wrong. And that's not to say that I know best and they don't. Like they may be right in the end about what to prioritize. But I think that scaling has been less of what they've been looking at than I would naively have expected. But I do think that it is a real chain. I think it's a cool chain, and I think that there's a world in which it gets absolutely huge. So
that's two: Solana, Avalanche, and
yeah, and then three. So, well, I mean, one question is like how you feel about side chains, layer twos, things like that. I think that wrappers are in general probably going to just keep growing over time, right? Like as you have a divergence between the chains that have the scale to handle the activity that's being asked of them versus the chains that the value lives on, right? You sort of have no choice but to dive deeper and deeper into wrapped assets. And so I think that I mean, there's lots of words that people use for this. Sometimes they call them layer twos, side chains, wrappers, whatever. But I think fundamentally, I expect that Bitcoin is going to remain at the center of the crypto ecosystem, but the Bitcoin blockchain might not be the blockchain that Bitcoin usually move along.
What do you kind of tell people who are still crypto skeptics?
Oh, I mean, I think it's really important. I think that's a big part of the world, and yeah, you could sort of ignore it, but that, I mean, do so at your own peril, really, right? So I think what I'd say is, first of all, that I'm not going to come here and give you confidence that anything I say is going to be right or the right way to think about this. I think if I did, I'd be bullshitting, right? If I come here and I tell you, this is how it is in crypto, I don't know, stop listening to me, right? Because no one knows for sure what's going to happen. But I think the big thing I'd say is look, I'm not going to take the lamest JPEG NFT that's ever been made and try and convince a skeptic that is high art. I don't even know exactly what high art means, but whatever. I there's no point in fighting that battle, right? I don't even know if I think it's meaningful, right? But let's instead focus on the upside, on what this could be, acknowledging that it might never get there, and that the goal here isn't to prove that it will get here, because I certainly don't think I'm going to convince a skeptic of that. My goal is to convince a skeptic that it might, that there's a world in which this becomes absolutely massive, and if I can get there, I will settle for that. And so, I think that look, take NFTs, right? I think there are a lot of things that we use in everyday life which are basically NFTs. What are some examples? Well, tickets are basically NFTs. song ownership rights, basically NFTs. I think you can look at what else is basically an NFT. I mean, video game items, basically an NFT. You guys know how much money people spend annually on video game items?
In game.
I wrote about that once. It's like 200 billion or something, isn't it?
Yeah, that's about the number. It's an absolutely spectacularly, like, colossally large amount. And so, I don't know. You think that's not going to become a big thing? Maybe it won't. I'm not going to tell you it definitely will. But, like, if you're going to tell me it definitely won't, I'm pretty happy to take the other side of that bet. Right? And like, you look at the financial infrastructure today where you try and send money to someone. Like, have you ever tried to send money to your friend and you don't happen to both use exactly the same weird fintech app? Like, you don't happen to, like, both use Zelle or whatever as, like, your main Zelle? I don't even know what category, right? Like, it's actually, like, really hard to send, like, $20 to your brother, right? That's not trivial. And that's, like, the single easiest transfer to do in the world. Imagine trying to send money to your loved ones back home in Nigeria, and you're paying 20% and it takes a week. And it probably doesn't get stolen. Like, that's not great. And then you look at a stablecoin transfer, and it's like, on some blockchains, like, 1 second, and it costs 1/100 of a penny, and then it's there. Now, it doesn't solve the whole problem unless merchants accept it, right? If you never get that adoption, then you're not solving the hard problem of remittances with stablecoins. But if you do, if merchants start accepting stablecoins for bananas, right, then all of a sudden remittances are trivial. It's aiming to look good by a different metric. And what's the most compelling evidence that I can bring about the impact that it's had on our business? There are some statistics we have, but let me actually, I think, go with maybe a much more direct response. In the last 5 minutes, new evidence has been brought to my attention that this has had a really big impact. And that evidence is you deciding it was important to ask me about. Right? Like, you're an example of a person for whom clearly this was effective.
That's interesting. I mean, I knew FTX already, but it's reached a sort of saturation point. Yeah.
But if you sort of, like, rewind to, like, yourself, but who knew us less well, right? And it's not just you, like, everyone we talk to who knows us a little bit, a lot, barely, intimately, this is top of mind for them.